Welcome, future doctors, to another episode of the Future Minority Doctor Podcast with Dr. Zulma
and Marina, where we bring you conversations to empower and inspire you to contribute to your community and the world by becoming a doctor. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Future Minority Doctor Podcast. Today, Dr. Zulma and I are going to have a conversation that you hopefully find helpful about using AI tools like ChatGPT, for example, which is really popular these days, in order to help you tell your story when you are preparing your application for medical school. A lot of students that we work with through our application coaching program, which if you don't know about, you should check out on our website. But a lot of the students we work with have trouble writing or have trouble telling their story. And as we've worked with so many students over the last several years through this program, we've realized that it takes a lot of help. You almost need like a coach to help you learn how to tell your story. I think it's pretty rare for a student to just come to us with a personal statement that is already perfect. Usually it takes a couple of different drafts, and it takes us asking them the right questions to help pull the right stories out of them so that they can really communicate their why for medicine, their passion for medicine, why they're doing all the work they're doing in order to become a doctor. And the writing is not just important when it comes to the personal statement. It's also really important to tell stories throughout all of your activity descriptions and your most meaningful essays and your other impactful experiences essay and all of the secondary essays as well. So most students come out of that experience saying, I feel like I became a better writer and better at telling my story. But not all of you are going to have me and Dr. Zulma and our team helping you to write your essays. And so we wanted to do this episode to kind of give you some tips and some tools to help you, especially teaching you how to correctly use AI tools like ChatGPT to help you pull out your stories and tell your story. Dr. Zulma, what are some of the things that you've seen as you work with students? Like, where do they struggle when it comes to communicating their why or telling their story?
Yeah, so of course, every student is different. I would say one is sometimes just where to start, right? At this point, you guys are in your 20s and you've gone through so many things. It's hard to really just reflect on your entire life and figure out what is it that I need to actually put out on this paper, number one. Number two, what is considered important for me to put on this paper? Sometimes I feel like even when I was a student, you think this is the important stuff, but yet when you have another set of eyes look at it and they take a look at it, we know that there's more than this, and it might not be what will represent you well for the application. So I think that's something that a lot of the students struggle with. We have the pleasure, Dr. Marina and I, of meeting with these students and really getting to know them and ask them and dig into parts of their life. And it's so funny I'm pretty sure you've gone through this. I'm talking to students and then they're telling me, oh yeah, and this happened, this. And then I'm like, wait, stop right there. Tell me more about that. And then out it comes, and they're like, oh, I never thought that was like something important. I'm like, no, that's very, very important. I want you to focus on that instead. So the other issue with writing is there's limits, your character limits. It's hard to try to tell your story when you have limitations on how many characters you can use. So I think that's another huge struggle as well.
Yeah. And I like what you just said right now about sometimes they're talking to us and then they tell us something and it's like, wait, why didn't you talk about that in your essay? I have that experience all the time. In fact, so when I meet with a student, I focus most of my time on reviewing the personal statement and then outlining a second or a next draft with them. And often I read their personal statement and there are really good parts about it, but sometimes it doesn't really do the job of communicating like the chronology of your story. I tell students, when someone is trying to get to know you through a paper application, and the first thing they're reading is usually the personal statement, the chronology of your journey to medicine has to be very clear. I don't really like it when students kind of start in a story and then they jump back in time and then they jump forward in time, and it just confuses me. It gets me confused. So I say start from the beginning. When was the first time in your life when you thought, hey, maybe I want to be a doctor? This is a possibility. I started to see it as a possibility. At what point in time, right? And then how did that get built upon? How did that grow? How did that evolve? How did your understanding of what it means to become a physician grow and evolve? And you can show that through stories of subsequent experiences that you had. So recently I met with a student, and her essay was really good in many ways, but I felt like she was working too hard in her personal statement to just highlight, like, oh, I did this research and then I did this clinical experience. And it's like, those are important, but you can tell me about those in your most meaningful essays. You don't
Mm-hmm.
have to focus all your space in your personal statement. The personal statement isn't quite telling me like why, like the chronology of your story. And so what I do with everyone is I say, okay, put the statement aside, don't look at it, and just tell me right now, off the top of your head, without thinking too hard about it, why do you want to be a doctor? Where did that start? And then I take notes as they are telling me just
Mm-hmm.
off the top of their head why they want to be a doctor. Then often that brings out the truth. That brings out the truthier
Mm-hmm.
truth. that then that helps us to draft a second outline for their personal statement. And they
Mm-hmm.
still use some of the stuff that they already wrote, but then I incorporate that kind of chronological. And so for this student, we ended up still taking some of the stories, like a story about when she fractured her bone and had to go to Mexico to seek help. But then she also told the story of she took a class, like an anatomy class in high school. And that's when she first got interested. And then she went off to college. She was the first one to leave her family to go to college. And after her first biology class, she just kind of gave up. She was like, oh my gosh, I did horribly in this class. This is not for me. And then she switched over to a different major, but she was still really interested in health. And then it wasn't until she did like a semester abroad in another country and she met another pre-medical student, and he was so passionate about being a pre-med and going into medicine that he helped her to rekindle that interest in medicine and to start to believe in herself. And so she went back to pre-med, and then like her journey continued. So I thought that trajectory was really important to tell because it's part of her genuine story, and it kind of helps to explain how even though she took a detour, it led her back, and the things that she was passionate about, including global health and serving people abroad, ultimately brought her back to this journey. So we were able to draft another version that she felt pretty comfortable with, and she continues to work on it, of course. But that's an example of how it can really help to have a coach kind of
Mm-hmm.
talking you through and getting those stories and that chronology. So let's talk about things like ChatGPT. ChatGPT can basically act as your coach when you don't have an in-person coach to help you.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you get stuck, you can use tools like ChatGPT to say, in fact, what you can do is basically what I do with students is like just write. If someone like me were asking you, why do you want to be a doctor? Don't even think too hard about it. Just type out an outline or a half a page of bullet points telling your story.
Mm-hmm.
And start with that. And then put it into ChatGPT and say, hey, I need to write a 5,000 character essay on why I want to be a doctor. Can you pull out some of the main key points from this outline that I should emphasize, right? And then you can start from there, and it'll help you to kind of pull out some of those key points. And then you can use that as a launching board to then refine it and then work on each paragraph and telling the different stories in those paragraphs, right? Any thoughts, Dr. Z?
Yeah, I think it's good. It's almost like you create the ideas, almost like an outline. And it's
Mhm.
nice that you can have a tool. Dr. Marina and I did not have this tool back in the day, but it's
No, we
nice that there's a system that can bring all of that together to at least give you a starting point, right?
don't.
Should not be your final point, but your
Exactly.
starting point. So that way you can work from there because it is hard. It's hard to start. Like I had a student where, we went over I get the pleasure of doing the impactful statement essay, so that's nice because I really get to know them. But, some students have a hard time with that essay because they're like, I kind of feel like if I write about some of these things, I don't want people to feel sorry for me, you know?
Uh-huh.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, I get it. I get it. So she struggled like to just where do I start? So I did exactly what Dr. Marina said. I mean, as she's talking, I'm writing notes as well. And then I tell them, I'm going to write as you're talking, go with it, go with the flow. And as I hear things that I feel are key, I'm going to just bring those points out and just like them bullet points.
Mm-hmm.
And I did. And then she said, okay, I think I kind of know now. So then she took it and she said, I'm just going to take a couple of days to really reflect on my life, given what we've talked about. And she did.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, it's going to be hard. But in that situation, it's great because we were able to have a dialogue. We were able to come up with some points, but she still needed further deep reflecting to see what she wanted to bring out that maybe she hasn't really thought about putting on her statement or her essay. But that would be
Mm-hmm.
a situation where she could have just done that. And then she can use a tool like ChatGPT. Now, like, okay, now help me bring this together with the limitation of this is how many characters I have to write
Mm-hmm.
as well.
Yeah,
So again,
exactly.
yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. And ChatGPT is not a mind reader. It cannot
Yeah.
just know all of your personal experiences. And so you have to feed that into it. And that's where it becomes okay to use tools in order to refine your story as long as you are giving it the source input. You are telling it, hey, I had this experience. Here are a bunch of details about it, but help me to tell it in a more engaging and compelling way and in a way that
Hmm.
tells this point. So, for example, I think every time you tell a story, it has to have a clear point to it. Now, you don't have to hammer the point home. The point should be evident from the story itself, but it can also be helpful to have kind of like a thesis sentence in your paragraph, kind of just bringing it home. So, for example, if you're sharing a story about working as a medical assistant in a free clinic or in a low resource clinic that serves the underserved. And you're talking about your interaction with a patient named Maria. And Maria developed diabetes, but she didn't have insurance and she was having trouble paying for her insulin. And you were able to help work together with clinic manager or case manager to help Maria to get her insulin medications. And so you tell that story, but then the point might be, for example, that like Maria and her experience, her struggles to access healthcare opened my eyes to the economic disparities that people face when trying to access healthcare. And I was motivated to become part of the solution to that. Right. So you tell a story, but you make sure that your story has a point in the bigger
Hmm.
chronology of your motivation to become a doctor, right? And so
Hmm.
again, you can, if you feel like you're stuck in telling that story, just write stuff without worrying
Hmm.
about how good it is. And then tell ChatGPT, hey, can you take these notes and refine them into a story about Maria that makes the point that blah blah blah, right? So that's how
Hmm.
it can help, but you are giving it the source content, you are giving them the story. Chat does not know how to make up a story that is true. Right, you have to that content. And then of course, piece by piece you can kind of use that to help you write your story. When it comes to the other impactful experiences essay that Dr. Zulma was talking about, a lot of students have trouble even thinking about things that would qualify for that essay. So what are some of the
Yes,
things, Dr.
correct.
Z, that you tell students, hey, think about this. Did you have this experience, this experience, this
Yes.
experience, right? What are some of the things people
Yeah.
should be thinking about?
I think the students in that situation that struggle with more, they feel like, I don't know if I need to complete this essay. I mean, my parents were off okay. I mean, they're like, we didn't struggle. We weren't like severely poor. I mean, in their mind, they had to basically be going through the roughest times to be able to qualify, to be able to write the statement. So they don't think about the
Uh-huh.
other things. Just recalling what some of those students, as we delve into like, oh, just tell me about how your life was. oh, what did you struggle with when you were in elementary school, middle school? And that's where that dialogue happens. So, a big one that I've seen is the psychological impact of something that they've been going through, that they don't realize that can be incorporated into this statement here, which makes them be more, I think, like if I was the one reading it and I'm looking in to see what type of medical students I want, someone who's gone through this difficult situation might not have to do financially, because a lot of them are stuck that it has to be financial, but
Yeah.
it's very, very impactful what they go through. I'm like, "Hey,
Hmm.
that's impactful what you just went through, because guess what? You don't know this yet, but myself as a doctor, you're gonna see so many patients like this. So, this is gonna make you a better doctor, be more compassionate as well, but it's important enough to highlight because not every student goes through it. So I think if anything, that's something along those lines when I've been working with students. It's hard for them to identify like what's worthy enough for me to write
Yeah.
about.
Yeah, definitely. And I remind students too that the average student who is entering medical school in this country is pretty darn privileged. They're coming from like a
Mhm,
middle upper class or upper class
mhm,
background, right? And so if you were not that, you can consider that a bit of a
mhm,
disadvantage or just something that you had to work through and overcome, right? So I grew up like we had a roof over our head. We had food on the table, even though sometimes we had to rely on welfare programs for that food. We
mhm,
had, but I qualified for free lunch, free or reduced lunch most of my years growing up. But most of my neighbors were in a similar situation to me. So
yes.
growing up in that environment, I didn't think of myself as different because most of my friends and most of my neighbors were in the same boat that I was.
Mhm,
And so the view is really relative. You're not comparing yourself to
yeah.
your neighbor. You're comparing yourself to the average, relatively privileged student who is entering medical
Mhm,
school, right? And a lot of those, I mean, when I went to college, it was like, oh, wow, these other kids, like, they went to Europe every summer and they, like,
yeah.
went to private schools and they had their own car when they were 16 and I mean, there's a lot of difference. And they had tutors and they could afford. I mean, when I was in college, students would ask me like, "Oh, are you coming to the basketball game or the football game?" And I was too embarrassed to say, "Well, I don't have money to buy a ticket to go." And so I would make up some excuse. So all of those little like disadvantages do add up. Like they affect your story. I couldn't volunteer for certain clinical experiences my first 3 years of college because I didn't have a car, and taking a bus and stuff was too much time, and that would take away from my study and work time. And so other students were able to, who had a car, were able to volunteer at the local hospital starting freshman, sophomore year, and I couldn't do that. So you have to think about all those little things, even if they don't seem that big in your mind. And obviously, you're going
Mhm,
to choose also what's most impactful. There was a student I worked with last year,
mhm,
and he mentioned at first he couldn't think of stuff. And I was like, come on, I know enough about you to know that you have stuff. And then finally he was able to talk about how like his mom kind of tried to shield him from this when he was little, but they were homeless for periods of time,
mhm,
but they weren't truly homeless because they would like jump from friend's house to cousin's house to aunt and uncle's house. And so they would be sleeping on people's sofas. But in a child view, he still felt like, "Oh, well, there's still a place for me to sleep, so
mhm.
I wasn't really homeless." But he was able to talk about that experience more because that is an experience I can guarantee the vast, vast majority of medical students have not been through, right? And so it's important to think about all of those different things. So,
You just made me think about, because there's also commonly that I come across is like some students who get accepted into for undergrad to these prestigious universities,
yeah,
and they have to make the decision that they can't go there because either they're responsible for a lot of things within their families, or financially they can't, or they don't have a car, whatever it might
yeah,
be. So here you have a student who, if they were in a different situation, would be able to go to this prestigious university that they worked so hard to get into. Usually it's like their
yeah,
dream school, and they have to decline it and just go to something
yeah.
locally.
Exactly. Yeah. So think about those things. Yeah, I've definitely talked to some students who had those experiences and they ended up going to community college because
Yeah.
it was just too expensive. There was a student who
Hmm.
started out like her family had saved money for college, and that only paid for one semester at one of these like better colleges. And so she came back home after that semester just saying like, I can't do it. I'm gonna go back to community college and work my way up. And she
Hmm.
did what she had to do. But that's an example, something to talk
Yeah.
about in those essays. Now, if you get completely stuck, you can ask chat and say, "Hey, I'm stuck on like what kind of things can I include in my other impactful experiences essay for my MD medical school application." Now, when you're using ChatGPT, a couple of things to know is the more details you give it about what you need, the better. So, for
Hmm.
example, don't just say, "Here's some details, write a story from these details," right? It's not going to have enough direction. If it's just writing a story, it doesn't know the purpose of the story. So instead, prompting ChatGPT in the right way is really important. You're going to say, take these details and write a 1,000 character paragraph as part of my medical school personal statement that makes the key point that blah, blah, blah. Right. And so do you
Hmm.
see how you're giving it like all of these details about exactly what you want? Now, if you do that and it gives you something that's not quite right, you can say, okay, that was good, but please also specify X, Y, or Z. And so you can kind of train it to do what you
Hmm.
want. And sometimes it takes playing around with it. It's not always going to give you what you need the first time around. You might have to play with it with giving it different prompts in order to get more specifically what you're looking for. With the other impactful experiences essay, just asking, hey, like, what are some things I should include? Then it'll kind of give you a list, and then you can start to bullet point for yourself. Well, I had this experience, this experience, this experience, this experience, help me to refine that. But you have to give it enough details, right? You can't just
Hmm.
expect ChatGPT because AI tools will make up stuff if you don't give it enough detail. They will sometimes elaborate, or sometimes it might tell you back, like, I don't have enough information to do this, right? And you don't want it making up information. That's one of the key points we want to
Yeah. Oh,
make
yeah.
is like you have to be responsible in how you're using it. You have to make sure you give it enough information so that the stories it is refining and the points that it's making are true to you and are coming from you and your life
Hmm.
experiences. But then it's just helping you to refine the writing of them, right?
Yeah, the last thing you want to do is have something on there that really didn't happen, and then you're at your med school
Exactly.
interview and they ask you about it, and you're like, "Let me think about that one."
Exactly. Please don't
Yeah,
make
you
things
do.
up. Uh-huh. Exactly. That would look really bad, really bad. And so, really, the way to think about is chat and AI tools can be used for amplification, not for generation, right? You are generating
Mhm.
the stuff and it is helping to amplify and to polish it, right? It's like a writing coach, not a ghostwriter. You're not telling someone, write my term paper for me. You're saying,
Mhm.
hey, this is my like draft and now help me to refine it, to polish it. And it has to still be your voice. If
Mhm.
ChatGPT issues something that is using a word that you don't know, find a synonym, change that word to something that you would use, right? Because you don't want
Mhm.
someone to ask you and then you don't know that word, right? I don't think they would, but it has to sound like you. It has to sound like you. Let's see some final points. Be careful. Like Dr. Z said, it has to be true to you. You have to tell real stories. And then finally, be careful not to overuse the AI tools because it's very likely that medical school admissions committees are going to have screeners. Just like when you
Mhm.
submit nowadays on like Canvas your term paper or your midterm or your exam, it has a way of screening it to see like how much of it is original content. And so if it says like, oh, this is 80% AI generated, that's a red flag. And so as time goes by and AI tools become more and more used, AI screeners are also going to be more and more utilized in order to screen for original content. They want to make sure that basically you're not plagiarizing, you're not just having AI come up with stuff
Yep.
for you. So that's where you have to be careful. And so that's why it's going to be a combination of you and chat, and make sure that whatever it gives you back, you are still going through, you're editing it to make it your own voice, and making sure that all the details are accurate and true to you. And that if someone were to ask you questions about anything in content, you could answer honestly and genuinely.
I would also add, so after you've gone through those steps that Dr. Marina said, still have someone look at it, your final product, because you're giving this information to AI, but they're not people, right? AI is not a
Mhm.
person. So you still want a couple of people to look at it, your mentor or whatever it might be, so you can still get feedback, because there's a very good chance you're going to have to go back to make some changes, especially when we want to bring up those details like Dr. Marina and I just mentioned earlier that we feel that are important and should be incorporated in it. So there's going to be a lot of modifications. So never turn in as a final product just what you came up with on AI. Someone needs to take a look at it as well. So
Uh-huh.
very, very important.
Yeah, thank you for making that point. Super important too. As it's also ChatGPT doesn't magically know everything about how the writing or the stories might be perceived. There might be a red flag about
Yeah.
like, oh, you're talking too negatively about this experience,
Mm-hmm.
and someone else might catch on to that where like AI might not. So, yeah,
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
excellent. So feel free to use AI tools, but do not overuse them. Do not abuse them. Do not expect them to do all the work for you. You have to use them responsibly. And hopefully, we've given you some useful tips on how to do so and how to help write your story and tell your story using AI tools as well. All right,
Yeah.
everyone. Thanks for
And don't
listening.
forget to
Until
check
next
us
time.
out too. We have to put,
Yes, check.
don't forget to check us out too for our application coaching program. Okay. Yeah.
That's right. And also, we have a lot of episodes that we've recorded previously on
Yep.
how to know whether you're ready to apply to med school, on writing a great personal statement, on writing great activity
Yep.
descriptions, all of that stuff on MCAT and improving your MCAT score. So please utilize the resources that we have. All right. Until next time, everyone, take care.